Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our very last discussion for 2013 EDN Technologies Education. And I have Belinda here with us, and hopefully a few more of you will join the Hangout. I see there's a couple of you watching online, so if you'd like to join the Hangout, you can post your email addresses into the Q&A or send me a message, and I'll bring you into our Hangout where we can discuss the topic for this week and clarify any questions about your assessment that you may have. Um, so this week's topic was around integration, and it's an important aspect to sort of finish up on because particularly in primary years we have a big focus. There's a couple of you so watching Linda, online, so if you'd like to join the Hangout, you can put your email addresses into. Have you got? There we go. So in primary schools in particular, we've often had an integrated approach to teaching of the learning areas. So we don't just teach technologies education or digital technologies or design and technology by themselves, but we very much integrate them in with thematic units. So a particular unit would incorporate learning outcomes from English and maths and technologies and the arts and all the other areas. So Belinda, have you had any experiences of seeing an integrated approach?
Oh, not really integrated, just more tokenism, I think.
Okay, and it does take a bit of practice. Queensland has been a world leader in the use of integrated curriculum, particularly in our primary years. And we actually had a very large project go throughout our state schools about 10 years ago now, where they had a fully integrated curriculum, and the remnants of that still exist in many schools as rich tasks, where a lot of schools still incorporate elements of that. But certainly, up until the Australian curriculum was rolled out, there was a very strong push to do more and more integrated approaches. The Australian curriculum, because of the political nature of it, to a certain extent, resulted in siloing back into subject areas or learning areas. But there's certainly the intent and the hope that we'll then start integrating those and producing a much more holistic learning program in schools than just looking at the individual subjects. So were there any questions from the video clips and the readings from this week, Belinda? Or anyone of you out there watching? I can see there's quite a number of you watching the video. So if you'd like to ask any questions or comments into the Q&A panel, that would be helpful.
Well, I honestly haven't had a chance to do it yet, which is very naughty, but I've been trying to get my assessment done. Sorry.
I do understand. Looks like we've got a couple of people wanting to join us. So Bonnie, I think you're on my list for invites. Let's just see if we can get Bonnie in here. If not, I'll see if I can get you in manually. Bonnie, I might just need your email address to have you join. If you could post that or send me an email, I'll manually add you in. Let's see if I can find you in my emails. There we are. But I'll need your Gmail email address. I've only got your university one. So, well, there were a few video clips. I sort of didn't think you'd be interested in doing a lot of reading this week because you are all focused on your final assessment, as you should be. So there were just a few little video clips to have a look at, mostly explaining project-based learning and also the integrated approach that often comes out of a project-based learning approach. Now, for those of you still struggling to get your heads around project-based learning for your assignment, for your unit outlines, I strongly suggest you have a look at those video clips, because a project-based learning approach will certainly stand you in good stead for completing a design challenge, because design challenges are very much a particular case of project-based learning. It's where students just choose to do a whole series of tasks rather than turn them into a project, which often then has, as we've seen in our course, a problem that's set, or a problem definition process, an investigatory process or research process, and then the production of a solution, and then evaluation. Having those stages is a very important aspect of achieving high results for your design challenge tasks. Now, the other thing I've probably noticed in some of the questions coming through about your design challenges are that you need to make sure that you've included a design challenge in your unit outlines. Now, the confusing aspect there is that the examples provided that you have to base your design challenge around are the solutions to a design challenge. They aren't the actual design challenge problems. So you define the problem. I've provided you with a solution that you need to work through to have arisen out of your design challenge. But your unit outlines do not need to include all the details about the possible solutions that students could derive. You're showcasing one possible solution from your unit outline. Now, a lot of students are simply creating their units as though they were the one possible solution to a design challenge. Now, you should probably try to think a little bit beyond that, though, in that a good open design challenge will allow students to approach the solutions to the problems in many different ways. One of which will be the one that I've required you to do as part of your to be your solution to your challenge. But your unit outline doesn't need to be limited just to that one possible solution. That doesn't mean, however, that you have to describe every possible solution that students would work through in detail in your unit outline. You simply need to provide the framework for them doing a design challenge and the specific details of, say, creating a dress or a piece of formal attire out of recycled materials or plastic bags could be a specific solution to a more general problem that could allow students to solve that problem in a variety of ways. So your unit outlines do not need to go into the specifics and the detail that you may show in your video. That's what I'm trying to get across there. Now let me just try to assist a few more people come in. And I see we've got Bonnie joining us, and I'll just keep sending out a few more invites. So we can hear you, Bonnie, though we cannot quite see you just yet. Now, it's good to see quite a few of you have already completed your second assignment, and you're probably not the ones here because you now consider everything done and dusted. But this final week, we were going to wrap things up by discussing in an integrated approach to the teaching of technologies education. In New South Wales, for example, they're going to be teaching, or at least the current plan is that they'll be teaching design and technology and digital technologies together as one subject area. In most other states, they'll be done as separate subjects. But an integrated approach, even within technologies, can allow you to do design challenges that incorporate both digital technologies and design and technology. And you've probably come across some of those ideas as you've worked through your unit outlines, where you could see some possibilities where you could have incorporated learning outcomes from both of those subjects into the one unit outline. Okay, so just waiting for some of you to come on back. And for those in the Q&A, if you'd like to ask any questions about an integrated approach from the readings and the video clips that I provided you, or if you've got any questions about your assessment, pop those into the Q&A and we'll answer those for you.
Oh, I have a question about the assessment.
Yes, Bonnie.
I've written my design and technologies one, and I'm not sure if it's specific enough, because in other subjects they've wanted really specific, like what are we doing with the kids. So for example, I've written during the producing phase, students will develop numeracy capabilities while engaging in activities. For example, measuring the height of their waist and estimating how many plastic bags they will need to make a skirt long enough. They'll select and use materials with textures and properties best suited to their design. For example, blah, blah, blah. Is that kind of alright, or does it need to be more specific?
Possibly less. Okay, there's certain things that you're being assessed on in this assessment task, and the primary one is your understanding of design challenges and how you can use the design process and the what do they call it, the processes and production stages to develop up a process whereby students go through a design challenge type activity. That's the main thing I want to see, whether or not you've actually incorporated that into your thinking. Then that's the criteria around your interpretive ability in developing a design challenge solution. Now that's the one where you've got your level of intellectual initiative in research, planning, and development of solutions. So how well you've gone through that process and thought about how students could do research, to do various planning processes, and to develop their solutions. So what you were describing was probably involved in there about them developing solutions, but don't neglect the other areas. How students actually, how you've framed things so that students could do their research or their investigative stage. Have you just got them using the internet, or have you thought about other ways they might do research? I don't want to give up lots of ideas for you here, but there's a whole range of different processes that students could do in researching the actual problem that they're trying to solve. Likewise, in coming up with ideas, there's a whole lot of ways that you can scaffold students so that they can generate lots of interesting ideas. And if you want to look back at the modules we had on creativity and design thinking, I gave you a whole lot of approaches that you could use there for generating creative and innovative ideas around technologies. Now, Rebecca asks us a question: is it expected that we integrate other curriculum areas into our unit plans? No, Rebecca, and in fact I would explicitly like you not to do that. Certainly, as we're discussing this week, an integrated approach is probably the best way of doing learning around the learning areas, but because I want you to focus on either design and technology or digital technologies for your unit outlines, I don't want you to spend a whole lot of time integrating those with other learning areas. Of course, the main focus of your assessment is on your understanding of those two subjects. So I know there's lots of opportunities for you to integrate, and I certainly, if you wish to just mention very briefly those, but don't go into any detail, because unfortunately we can't give you credit for that in this course. Of course, we're focusing on assessing your ability to understand the two subjects that we're engaged with So
Sorry,
certainly there's not an expectation that you integrate, but you could mention it briefly. Someone had a question there?
Yes, sorry. We just came in right in the middle of that. Sorry to be annoying. But what did you say? Don't mention what? Sorry.
Okay, don't go into detail about how your unit would integrate and achieve learning outcomes from other learning areas.
Oh, okay, not cross-curricular. Cool. No, that's
Yep.
good. Jason, I have a question. Sorry, I don't know if this has already been answered. We were having a bit of trouble with our internet. In the assessment, do we need to go through and detail the different formative and summative assessments in great detail, or if we outline the formative briefly and then hone in more on the summative?
I don't want to devalue formative assessment in any way, and I don't actually like
No.
using the two terms. Formative and summative are really the same thing in many respects, particularly in an open-ended activity such as a design challenge, where you're going to have elements being assessed all the way through, but they are also formative in terms of informing the next stages of the process.
Okay.
So, yeah, I wouldn't get caught up with trying to actually define them as formative or summative. Talk about assessment.
So just have it under a assessment title.
Yes, that would be you'd get in much less difficulties if you do that. There'll be certain things that you might, I would just talk about assessing students. Don't go into details about what might go into the report cards later and things like that, which might form their summative assessment elements. Think about what you're going to do to actually verify whether or not students have learnt various things and met various learning outcomes, and that should ideally occur all the way through a technologies unit of work. Just doing things at the end or at summative points probably would be detrimental to the learning process.
Cool. And one more, sorry if I'm cutting anybody off. The layout, there is no specific layout. If you've covered the content.
Correct.
Yeah, perfect.
Now, some of you will do it as tables or as unit planning templates. That's fine. We'll interpret those. I'm really encouraging you to use a more descriptive process. You can do it fully as an essay type format if you wish. But
cool.
The danger of just putting things into a table is that it has no explanation of why you've done certain things.
Yeah.
And that why is very important, particularly at the higher levels of assessment.
Cool.
Just seeing that you've done something, yes, we can try to infer some understanding from that. But if you've explained why you've done that, we can attribute much higher grades to that because we can understand how you've engaged with it. Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
So look at the assessment criteria. There's only 4 that you're trying to achieve. You really need to sort of focus on those and highlight those. And it doesn't mean you have to explain everything in the same level of detail. Hone in on some of particularly the innovative things, the things that you think you would receive the greatest credit for. If you're doing things 10 times and very similar things, don't go through and explain all those things the same way 10 times. Highlight and focus in on those things that really stand out in your unit, particularly as where they address those criteria.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep. So if you're doing an innovative aspect to assessment, don't go into great detail saying you're going to do classroom observation 5 times. But if there's a particular way you're doing assessment that's really going to really give evidence of student learning, then focus in on that.
Cool.
So
I have one more question if no one else wants.
Go on.
So for the videos, I actually have a age-appropriate daughter for one of our assessments. I know you said it's got to be tertiary level, but we were actually going to get her to do the assessment from the design phase. We were going to do it with her. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah, it's just for this unit, you're showing how the unit actually works through. The tertiary level was for the first assessment task. For this one, you're demonstrating how a student would go through the learning process,
Well,
and
that's
that's
what we
what
were
we're
going
really
to do. So
focusing
we
on.
were going to explain it and watch her design it on paper and
Absolutely, that's a
effectively
good way
do
of
the
doing it.
unit.
Yeah,
So that's okay?
it is. And the key thing for everyone watching and so forth is that your unit outline doesn't necessarily have to describe the same level of detail as what your video will describe. Your unit outline is an overview of students doing a design challenge, or a unit that includes a design challenge. The fact that that design challenge could lead to various possible solutions. A lot of students are preparing their unit outlines detailing the design process for their solution. It doesn't need to go into that level of detail. Your
No.
video showcases a specific example where you've gone into that level of detail
Cool.
and you've done a particular process of investigation and generating ideas, developing a solution, evaluating a particular solution, and that's fine. But your unit outline can be more general. Now you can seed in certain things, such as if they're obviously going to be creating something and they need certain skills to create that, then teaching them how to use a sewing machine could be an important part of your unit outline, and you could describe that. But in general, you don't describe all the possible skills and activities that might be associated with what students might come up with for their solutions. Now that's for a very open design challenge. Now many of you though will be doing more closed design challenges, and where students are working through a particular process and you're providing them with explicit activities and instructions. But the unit outline was never intended to be a detailed lesson plan that goes through all the things that you would do. You could say that based upon the choices that students have made in terms of their design challenge, then you'll provide them with particular examples of solutions that relate to that, so that they can then help them in their generating of ideas and things of that nature, without having to go explicitly in and say that you're going to show them how to make or to sew plastic together and things of that nature.
Jason, sorry, just a question then with my design one being the infographic for F2, because I just because I'm really struggling to create the infographic myself. I don't know how the Year 2 students would do it. Is it right then that I've created it as quite a closed challenge where you know, they're going to work on parts of the infographic themselves, like coming up with certain graphs themselves, then as a class collaboratively we're going to create the infographic? Because I just can't see, I've got kids in that age group and I can't see them being able to successfully create an infographic.
You can do it as a closed challenge, and that is one approach to design challenges. But maybe think a little bit broader. You might consider having them do some activities where they're creating an infographic using the whiteboard and putting up pictures on a whiteboard and creating it that way, or drawing it on pencil and paper or crayons, or making it out of clay. There could be various ways of communicating information that could lead up to doing it as a digital technology solution, and even creating a graphs and an infographic out of clay or as a physical object would still count as an infographic. It just wouldn't be a digital infographic in that case. The digital technologies aspect could come into using spreadsheets and other things to sort information that could then be used in a physical way. But if they decide that a physical approach or a non-digital approach is the best solution to their problem, then a more open design challenge would allow that as a solution pathway. While other students might find doing it on the computer might be a better solution. So that's where giving the general framework of presenting information to others in terms of an infographic type solution doesn't necessarily mean it has to be just one particular solution to that problem.
Okay, so you might have just like saved me about 65 hours work. possibly, which could make me the most excited girl in the world. So I literally could.
That said, have a look at, in your own research, have a look at what digital tools there are for creating infographics. There are a lot of online tools that allow you to create infographics very, very easily.
Oh, I've looked, Jason, but I'm an old typewriter girl, so to me these online tools to create infographics look so easy, but I've been playing with them for hours, and that's why I'm looking the way I'm looking this morning. So could I get, don't laugh at me, Nina and Claire, thank you. So could I literally get them to, could their infographic that they create be made without using an infographic program? Could it be made using manipulatives or some other way, and then we could use digital technologies to get the infographic to the person who wanted it? Or, I don't know, help me out, save me some time here.
It could be, if the process that you've gone through to coming up with the solution is that is the best solution to the problem. So that's where you've got to think about the problem that you're trying to solve. So if it is to present to the Prime Minister that you're the best class in Australia, then doing it up on the wall could be an approach, but you would have to look at other approaches and make the decision as to which is the best approach.
See, I know the best approach is to create the infographic online. I know that because it looks awesome, but my honest, besides the fact that it's taking me 65 hours to create it, my honest opinion is I have children in that F2, and there is no way they could do that. There is just, is so far beyond their ability level. That's why in my challenge I had them creating the individual graphs like themselves or in groups, and then as a class collectively we were going to create the infographic. So that's why I directed it that way. Because
well, yes, you could do it. You could certainly do it as a collective task. Design challenges can be involved in that, and they might do individual elements, like one group creating a pie graph, one group creating a bar graph, one group creating a picture graph with pictures representing some sort of data. So there could be definitely ways of combining that into a collective task if you think that individually they couldn't achieve that. So that's certainly a valid approach, particularly with the younger year levels.
Yeah, I just really believe, and I think Nina's daughter's in the same age bracket, I just know that there is just no way my kids could do that. But I hate to admit it because it means a lot of work. The best way is to create an infographic. I mean, it is the best solution to my problem. So I know I'm going to have another all-nighter, and that's fine, and create this infographic, but I just wanted to make sure that doing it this way, having them do individual activities to collaboratively come together with the infographic, to make sure that's okay. So I have, in essence, I have had to make it a closed challenge because for that age group, I just couldn't see another way to get around it.
And you're right, most design challenges at that age level will be a lot more closed, but allow them to have at least some choice, or at least collectively have some choice in terms of options that they engage with, whether or not doing a pie graph or a bar graph or a picture graph and things like that.
Oh, yeah,
are best ways of showing information.
Yeah, no, I have. Yeah, they're coming up with ideas, and then that's also in our evaluating phase. That's where when we're going to actually create the pictograph using the graphs or whatever that they've come up with, designed with themselves, and we're going to put it into the pictograph, and then in that evaluating phase we're going to say, well, was that the best graph to represent that data? And that's going to be one way we're going to evaluate it, along with the other way that I was speaking about before. But yeah, that's sort of how I'm getting this age group to do that higher order challenge, and that's how I'm going to evaluate this age group, I think, the most successfully.
But you might also consider that they could do a lot of those things on paper first before then doing them using a computer program. So you could create, or they could print out some pie graphs or bar graphs and combine them together on the wall, and then replicate that on the computer. So there could be various ways of making that easier for them to engage with than doing everything purely on the computer. Or yourself as the teacher might do the final collation aspect into a thing on a computer, whereby the individual students work on the components of it. And that could be actually a good digital technologies concept of how you can then amalgamate various information together to produce a more complex piece of information.
Okay, I like that. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, so do we have some other questions?
Yeah, Jason, just about that, about having different solutions to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If it does work out that the best solution is not an infographic on the computer, and they make it some other way, is your whole unit kind of pointless because you're not doing digital technologies in the end? You're just doing the design?
Not at all, and that's where I know that it causes some confusion around digital technologies, but if you look at the digital technologies concepts, having to look at the data and how that data can be represented in different ways, having to sort that data, having to present it in different ways is all about digital technologies. Now, ideally, we would use some computerized tools to assist us with that. So maybe putting some information into a spreadsheet and sorting it so that it's alphabetical or from highest to lowest and skills of that nature. Now, they can be done manually, but actually looking at how the computer can do it and why the computer can do it more efficiently is a really good digital technologies concept. Likewise, looking at how computers can present information, but how we can also present information in other ways, and looking at the advantages or disadvantages of computers in terms of how they present information is a really good digital technologies concept. So the fact that they're looking at alternatives to digital technologies actually means they're engaging with the concepts around digital technologies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. So can I just, with the unit outlines, is one way of looking at it like we are presenting the design process and the production, then the process of production skills through a context of a unit outline with the design challenge. So we're presenting the design process.
Certainly your unit outline or your unit should include students going through the design process. But you don't need to go through it in incredible detail. That's where your video of you actually going through that process is designed to showcase that. Your unit outline itself doesn't need to go through that same level of detail. That's why you've got the video there to actually identify how you would go through that design challenge process.
Okay, thanks. And also about assessment, I put some points down, so like the minimum point and the minimum thing that each student would have to do for each step of the process to get a satisfactory C. Is that kind of what you wanted? And then I had put down, is that, no, you said we have to think about how they might fail.
You certainly do need to, or you certainly should have some indication of that. Whether or not you need to do that for every single assessable element, probably not. You'd probably have to do a rubric or something up to achieve that. But some general discussion about how you're going to differentiate, say, an A student from a C student or a failing student, and some of the things that you would be looking for that would indicate those levels. Okay, because the main thing is we want to see that you're thinking about assessment and that you're thinking about assessing students at different levels. That's what I'd really like to see in your unit outline. But the great level of detail that you might have to do in practice for, if you've included a lot of assessable elements, maybe just do one as an example, and maybe mention some of the other things that you're assessing, but go through one in detail, but don't try to do them all in detail, otherwise you'd probably be using up your whole 1,000 words just on assessment.
Okay. Yep.
Now I've got a question from Charisse. With that challenge that Belinda is talking about, I had them initially explore creatively presenting their photos and trying to share it, and then they were faced with the issues, e.g. too large, which they then built on and extended in their defining stage. Okay, so from what I'm hearing there is the students are looking at some data, in this case images, and they're looking at the properties of that data, and some of it is in terms of the size of the files and so forth, and trying to then work out ways of presenting or storing that data and understanding the digital properties of those. And so that's, yes, that would all be engaging with digital technologies concepts around computational thinking. Maybe looking at some of the similarities of the data and the patterns in the data related to the images. So some images might all show people, and some images might show other things. Some might all show headshots where people can be identified. Some of the images might all be in a particular file format, say JPEG or GIF or something like that. Some images might be in different resolutions, and then there's the file sizes. And they're all things that students could consider around digital technologies in terms of how best to store that data, how best to then present it or manipulate that data in terms of putting it into a database or a searchable system of some sort, or just sorting it in terms of sizes or where it could be used on web pages, etc. So they're all things that they could think about in that sort of challenge. But remember, they're the actual practical aspects. You still need to frame it around a problem to be solved. So why are they working with images in that way? What is the problem that they're trying to solve with respect to that? And that will then inform what aspects they then consider about those images in order to solve a particular problem that's related to those images.
Sorry, Jason, one quick one. I won't keep annoying you. Just with my other one, my design, it's the Design 3 push-pull toys. Just because the fact, just time for me. Can I just design one and have that on my video, or do you want me to make 3?
Let me just check the problem. What did I say in it?
Oh, don't go back and look. Just say yeah, one's okay.
What year? That would be an early years one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's F2. Oh, that's Janine in the background, by the way.
Hi, Janine. Okay, you need toys for an energetic 2-year-old. Design and create and test at least 3 different innovative and durable push or pull toys made from recycled materials. Okay, the reason I put the 3 in there was to try to frame it around a problem that involved comparison. See, it's very simple to make a push toy, and particularly for young kids, it's a very, very simple task, but framing it around a problem whereby you need to have some sort of comparison between different types of push toys is really what the challenge there is.
I didn't put it in that context at all. Okay,
what context did you approach? Convince me you've got an equally valid context.
Oh, I've got a totally valid context, of course. I mean, I can sell ice to Eskimos. So, following the recent floods, a family lost their home and all their belongings. The family has no money to entertain their energetic 2-year-old. What could we do?
Okay. Yes. Now, I see the context of what you're saying there. Now, the reason why there was 3 is because it's such a very simple task to create. I wanted you to do a bit more than just create a single push toy. Now, in a practical classroom environment where you've got 30-odd students, you could have that comparison occurring by looking at the various solutions that students come up with. But for an individual student doing it, in order to be able to do some valid comparison and make it a bit more robust an activity, you probably do need to do the 3.
No, that's okay. I'll change a bit of my I'll change a little bit during my thing because I didn't quite get the fact that 3 is to compare. I did the fact that 3 was to give this kid a few more toys than because he's got none. So
okay.
Yeah, that's okay. That was my misinterpretation of the challenge. So I will, I'll make some changes and
Okay.
do it. 3 was for to assess them. That's fine. I understand that now. No worries. I
have another question too after listening to that. I'm doing the foundation challenge, the mosaic one, the digital.
Yes.
Yeah, but I actually changed the design plan. Or no, I changed like the problem as well, in that I've set the problem, the school are entering the whatever competition for arts. The theme is mosaic design. However, the class computers do not have an adequate program, so their problem it links with one of the digital elaborators using softened hardware, digital hardware, research and find an appropriate application or program to download onto the class computers in order to complete the challenge. And one of the elements that they have to research, and they're going to do it collaboratively, is that the program will need to allow for resolution change. Is that wrong, Ben?
Well, it's certainly a task.
And it's a problem because they've got to learn how to research a program and then download it using digital hardware in order to complete the task. So if they can't do that bit, they can't do the task.
Normally that would be part of an investigative process or investigation stage in a design challenge. I'd probably encourage you to maybe think a little bit more creatively in terms of the context. Just entering the competition.
I've got no more creativity left, Jason. I've got no more left.
Could you maybe think of some other reason why they need these mosaics other than as a set task that they have to do for a competition or for the teacher? But it's not a set task
because the class, I've made it authentic because they're actually entering a valid competition externally outside of the school. So it's authentic as well.
Yes, and I can see that practically happening in a classroom environment. It's just that it's not a really engaging reason for the students. Now, even external competitions will often frame them in some sort of context as to why they're doing the actual challenge. So maybe think about the use of photo mosaics and why would people want to actually use photo mosaics? What's the practical uses of them?
I don't know. Aside from the fact that they look creative, I absolutely don't know.
What about as a Mother's Day present? Wouldn't you like one of Princess as a Mother's Day present? Maybe you could say. I don't know. I'm trying to sell this for you somehow, Nina.
Well, what about thinking about it in terms of your class? Okay, if maybe it's for the class photo, and a photo mosaic of all the students in the class in one photo, and it might be
because they represent as the actual image, because it's got to be of one person. In the problem, it says to make sure that you can still identify yourself. So I made it an individual task, whereas they use photos that they've taken as a collective group of the class to then make their individual mosaics. But in order to create that, they've got to research the programs.
Well, how about this? What if?
Saying no, aren't you?
What if this is for? Because a whole lot of students were away for the class photo, they were going to have to create a photo mosaic of a whole range of existing images of the students, but they were all in different resolutions. And if they just combined them all with those different resolutions, it would look quite horrible because some would be really detailed and clear, and others would be very blurry and not very clear. So the challenge was to work out what was going to be the minimum resolution that all the photos would have to be so that it all looked good, and then change the resolution of those that are too high down to that resolution, and maybe work out ways, if it's possible, to improve the resolution of those that are too low so that it has some consistency and it looks as though they were all taken by the one photo.
I think the only way to improve this task is to change my challenge to a different criteria. This is not working. I don't know, that seems so complex to me. Because even for me as an adult, when I went on to this mosaic, and I've created lots of mosaics, I can't actually change the resolution of the original photographs. I can only change the resolution of the mosaic to make it more distorted or clearer.
No, but you may need to use another tool, like a normal photo editing tool, to change the resolution before you then add them to the photo mosaic.
Oh, yeah, no, that, yeah, I'll change it.
The point. That's where the understanding of resolution comes in. If you're going to have a photo mosaic, you want to have all the photos of some similarity so that they all look good together.
My problem with this subject, and it's not with you at all, but I actually can't decipher these things myself, and I'm turning 34 in 2 weeks. How is my 7-year-old meant to be able to do it? Because I have totally taken that whole resolution thing and gone off on a different tangent. How is a 7-year-old supposed to get it? Like, my daughter doesn't even know what resolution is. She's just learning to use a camera.
Well, that's why the subject is bringing these concepts in, so that the students will get an understanding of resolution.
Concept for a 7-year-old?
Build it a bit earlier.
Well, not at all. If they're
then
going
I must be very dense.
Well, it's that you haven't grown up with learning about these things, which is why we're introducing it into schools. So the fact that you could take a photo with a camera, a digital photo with a camera, doesn't mean that you can use it in all cases. Like if you wanted to print out that photo, if it's only really tiny, low resolution, it's going to look horrible if you print it out at any large size.
Yeah.
But it might be perfectly fine for going on a website. And in fact, putting a really, really detailed photo on a website would mean you've got to wait 5 minutes for it to download on a website. So getting those basic understandings of concepts of the impact of resolution on the users of photos is a fairly simple and important concept, and that's why it's included in the curriculum. How we then use it. But I perfectly understand that you don't have a lot of background in that because you haven't had an opportunity to learn about those concepts.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this course, we can't teach you all the concepts that students would learn, but those things will come about in textbooks and other resource materials that you'll have as a teacher.
That I'll read in my spare time.
Well, as you come to teach this material, you'll read about it, and you'll, just as you have to do with science or with mathematics and other concepts. So don't assume that you know everything that you're going to have to teach related to digital technologies in particular. Just the same as with design and technology, if you come to do some stuff around agriculture and growing of things, you're going to have to do a bit of reading and understand how to do those things before you teach about it.
So knowing that clearly I didn't get the concept of the task, would you suggest that I go back and do a little bit more research and try and base it around that, or just do a different one?
Well, if you're doing the resolution one, I would absolutely expect you to actually do a little bit of research into what resolution involves. Now, you should do that as part of your video showing how students would do it. If you set it to a task for students, either you would provide them with some resource material to learn about resolution, or they'd do a bit of research online or using some textbooks. Just doing some basic Wikipedia searches on resolution or digital resolution would start giving you some good advice. You could even do a bit of a search. So I'd probably even start with YouTube and do something simple about teaching resolution or teaching the concept of resolution. There'd be resources already out there for teaching it, and that
so that would be the investigate stage.
Certainly for the students, and very often teachers would assist them and scaffold them in that process, particularly with this sort of task where it's all based around resolution. As a teacher, you'd probably introduce some examples and some activities that they'd go through to understand resolution a bit more before they did the task.
Okay. All right. All right, I'll have a crack.
Cherise asks us, what's a good program or way to change the resolution? Okay, almost any image editing program where you've got the option to change how a photo looks will give you the option of saving it at different file sizes or different resolutions, and you can then save it into different ways in that respect. Often it'll also allow you to save it in different formats like JPEG or GIF, and having an understanding of what those different formats mean can be important, because generally they'll relate to resolution, but they also relate to how the image is or the data is compressed. They store colors in different ways, or they store the type of the image in different ways, and that makes it possible to save the image in smaller file sizes. But that's another concept that you'll need to teach eventually, but may not directly relate to resolution in this respect. Okay, do we have any other questions? We might briefly pop back to the topic of this week, and that's integration. Has anyone had any examples or experiences of teaching integrated units, or cross-curricular units as it's sometimes called? No one's done that in schools that you've been out on practicum or seen it happen? So it certainly is a...
I misunderstood the question earlier. I've seen it happen a little bit, like when, you know, they're doing geography or science or something, and then they'll bring in English into it, that sort of thing. I haven't seen integration at all with our subject, though, to be honest. I've seen tokenism, as I said before, but I have seen integration where other KLAs are all brought together, but not this one.
Okay. Well, certainly design and technology, and to a lesser extent, because it's still new, digital technologies traditionally have been well integrated, particularly around the context. So doing, say, a design and technology context around a storybook or a movie is a very popular approach, where you create your design challenges based around what students are reading in their English or other learning areas. Science and design and technology are very often integrated together. Where you're doing a scientific concept, say, you're looking at, or a very popular one is flight, and coming up with an understanding of flight in science, and then creating solutions to that problem of flight in design and technology. And then you've also got the area of cooking, and that often relates well with health and PE or with science. And there's often lots of opportunities to integrate across the concepts. I see we've got Damien watching here, and he uses easy thumbnails for changing resolution. And he's provided a link there to change resolution quickly and easily.
Where's the link provided?
Okay, it's in the Q&A section.
Where Belinda's written sell, sell, sell?
No, that's the comment section. Just below that, you'll see a little blue button called Q&A. If you click on that, okay, you may not have that installed. Okay, I thought it was a standard one now, but
no, it's actually down the left-hand side of the screen. If you go over the left, if you move right to the left-hand side of the screen, a stack of hyperlinks, I think it is, come up, and it's got a blue.
Oh, yeah.
There you are. Now, Rebecca mentions that in her prac classes, they are integrating science into technologies by designing a sustainable energy device. Yes, another good example of an integrated approach. Now, when you do that, you do need to make sure that you address it from the learning area objectives of both subjects, or of the subjects involved. So science would look at that activity from the learning outcomes that they want to achieve from a science perspective, and from a design and technology perspective, you'd look at it from the learning outcomes from the curriculum involved in design and technology. But those sort of activities, and integrated activities, will often give great opportunities for lots of learning outcomes to be addressed from many learning areas. Okay, so any other examples of integrated approaches? Well, how about not that you need to include them in detail in your assignments now, but can you think of any integrated areas of other learning areas that you could integrate into your tasks that you're developing for your unit outlines?
Insanity.
Yes, so health and PE could be an integrated aspect of teacher education.
Actually, yeah, my one with the infographic, I've integrated maths into it because they're using graphs and representing data and that sort of thing. So actually, I'd just put like maybe 5 words that it cross-curricular with maths.
Absolutely, and that would link in very easily. But you could also think about art, particularly around the visual aspects of a infographic in terms of the aesthetic processes involved. How about some of the others that people have been thinking about? Or for those watching online, can you think of any integrated approaches that you could incorporate into your design challenges?
Well, for the digital one, I was thinking, well, I will. I am doing the one about the story, like the interactive story, where they choose where the story leads. So I suppose that would really fit in. A major one would be English there, because they're writing it. But could I also incorporate different ways of telling the story, maybe through pictures and little animations and things?
Absolutely. So English would be an obvious one, which would have narrative development and storytelling would be part of it. But you could also maybe think about the arts and how they use images to portray concepts and so forth. And you can incorporate the aesthetic elements there. Rebecca also mentions the interactive story one, because that's a nice easy one, particularly for the younger years where you're used to storytelling a lot, and it's a great way of getting students to do storytelling, even though they might not be, or they might be hesitant writers.
I was just having a bit of trouble thinking of a context for that one. I thought the best thing I could come up with was that people are wanting more interesting books to read, or that there are not enough books for the number of people to suit their interests, so you could make a book that covers lots of interests. Or is that's kind of...
Yes, no, they're good practical applied problems. But you could make a story up around it. Maybe in the neighbouring town, the library is burnt down, or their school library burnt down, and they don't have any books. So as a class project, you're going to create a whole lot of digital books so that they can get access to those. Or you could look at countries in the third world where they don't have access to storybooks. And by creating a whole lot of storybooks, they can be digitized and sent over to them easily and share those stories out. Or it could be related to the story itself in terms of getting a better audience for it. Printing out a few individual books might only reach a small audience, but if it's an important story to tell, it could be a good way of actually transmitting that to tens of thousands of people. Things of that nature.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
Any other integrated approaches people have thought about? Well, we might wrap things up then. So this is our last online session. So it's been great teaching you guys, and hopefully you're getting a lot out of this course. I know it's always stressful getting final assessments done, but hopefully that'll all pale away once you've achieved that and you've received success. Hopefully. Exactly. It's always good when you receive success and acknowledgement of that success through high grades.
Yes.
But don't overthink the problems. Okay, the unit outline is really meant to be that. It's meant to be an outline. It's not meant to be a really huge detailed unit plan. It's not meant to be a whole lot of lesson plans. Okay, it's only 1,000 words. It's not meant to be that incredible detail. That's why you've got the video to showcase those aspects. Don't try and showcase everything in your unit outline as well. But best of luck with those, and I'll be seeing most of you again in 4th year when we have a look at ICTs in a bit more detail.
All right. Thank you very much
Jason.
for the course.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jake.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right.